Hey everyone, Victor is here, and in this video I want to talk about the transition metal complexes, and this is going to be an introductory video to the transition metal complexes. So within the scope of this video we're going to talk about what the transition metal complexes are, the different Ligand classifications that we are going to be using for those complexes, the oxidation states and how to find the oxidation state, what is the D notation and how we are going to use that, and finally we're going to talk about the 16 and 18 electron rules and how those are important for transition metal complexes. Alright, so transition metals, those are the D block of the periodic table, which is these guys over here. I'm only including the 4th, 5th and 6th periods of the periodic table here, as the 7th period with the transuranium elements have no practical applications for our purposes due to their extremely low stability. They are all extremely radioactive and they just decompose way too fast. So a really cool thing about the transition metals is that they can coordinate ligands around them. And when I use the word coordinate here, I mean the formation of a specific type of a chemical bond, which is not your typical covalent bond, but neither it is an ionic bond. Essentially, if we take some sort of a metal and a ligand, I have those as M and L over here, the ligand is always going to be the source of the electrons. So we can draw a curved arrow like this, showing the electrons going from the ligand to our metal, which essentially going to give us a complexation similar to Lewis acid-base complexation. We typically refer to those bonds as donor-acceptor bonds, and sometimes you can even see people use the arrow instead of a simple line to indicate those bonds. Now, this is an extremely simplistic explanation of the bonding in the complexes because the true nature of what is going on there goes way beyond the scope of this video and frankly goes beyond the scope of the introductory organic chemistry, because generally what we're going to start seeing there is interaction of d orbitals with s and p orbitals, and those interactions are notoriously difficult to wrap your head around. So for our purposes we will just think that ligand provides the electrons to our metal and we'll call it a day. When we need to talk about those things in more details, maybe within the scope of, like, let's say inorganic chemistry or something like that, well, then you will learn more about the nature of those bonds, but for now we'll just keep this very simplistic approach to it. Now, when it comes to the ligands themselves, there are many different classifications that we use for those. I'm only going to go over a few most useful for our purposes. First, we can classify ligands by charge. We can have neutral ligands, like let's say ammonia, water, carbon monoxide, triphenylphosphine, and other ones. And we can have charged ligands like cyanide, halides, alkyl groups, hydrides, and so on. And while there are different ways how those can be abbreviated depending on the textbook you're using and your instructor's preferences, I'm going to be using the capital L letter for neutral ligands throughout my videos and the capital X for the charged ones. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is denticity. Denticity is defined as the number of donor groups that you can have in your ligand that can participate in bonding. And since we're dealing with organic molecules, some of those can get quite large and have multiple places where the bonding can occur in the same time. Denticity is typically abbreviated with the Greek letter kappa with a superscript number depicting, well, denticity itself. So, for instance, ammonia has only one donor group, and therefore we can say this is a kappa-1 ligand, or in other words, we can call it a monodentate ligand. Or here's another example with 2 nitrogens. In this case, we have 2 donor groups, and hence that is going to be kappa-2 or a bidentate ligand. So when it binds to a metal center, it's going to make essentially a cycle, and similarly we can have tri-, tetra-, pentadentate ligands, and so on. Here is a classic example, the ligand used all over the place in analytical chemistry called EDTA, ethylene diamine tetraacetate. This guy has 6 donor groups, so we're going to abbreviate that as kappa-6 and call it a hexadentate ligand. Also, when we have ligands that have 2 or more donor groups, we call them polydentate ligands. or another term that you'll hear from time to time, that is chelating agents, which is very popular in analytical chemistry. And the really cool thing about chelating or polydentate ligands is that they make very stable complexes, which is actually not a very good thing for our purposes, but I thought I'd still mention that nonetheless, so you know that, what the fuss is all about if you hear that polydentate ligands are out of this world amazing. Now, can we have a higher denticity, higher than 6? And yes, we can absolutely have higher dentate ligands. But the problem is that usually in order to be able to do that, you need to have, first of all, a very large atom that can physically accommodate more than 6 groups around it. And another thing that you need to keep in mind is that you are going to have a lot of empty orbitals on that atom in order to be able to accommodate all of those electrons that the ligand is bringing. So we don't have that many choices, and when it comes to the D elements, the hexadentate ligands, they are pretty much a hard cap. There are a few exceptions here and there, but generally speaking, it is really difficult to find any examples where you're going to have more than 6 ligands around D elements. And before we move on, there is one more classification we gotta talk about, and that is hapticity, which we use when we're describing ligands that bind to our metal center via an uninterrupted or contiguous, if you like, series of atoms. In this case, we're going to use the Greek letter eta, which is also going to have superscript, but we pronounce that as hapta and not eta, because why make things easy, I guess? Now, importantly, the hapticity is not the same thing as denticity. Let me explain this one. Let's say we have ethylene here. When this molecule binds to a metal, we have both carbons making a bond with the metal center. And we're going to abbreviate this guy as hapta-2. Or let's say we have this enamine structure as our ligand. If this guy binds to a metal center with each carbon of the alkene portion and the nitrogen as well, we're going to have 3 contiguous atoms binding to the metal, making it hapta-3 ligand. Or here's a butadiene molecule. When we are binding into the metal center, it becomes a hapta-4 ligand. In contrast, when we have this molecule, for instance, with 3 oxygens separated by carbon chains, when this ligand coordinates around the metal center, we end up with 3 separate donor groups, not an uninterrupted atom series like in the previous examples. So this one is going to be tridentate or kappa-3 ligand and not hapta-3 because, as I said, we have 3 separate non-contiguous atoms. And if that sounds like a ton of terminology, well, yes, it is. But think about that as learning a new piece of nomenclature when you're starting a chemistry of a new functional group or something like that. Pretty much same difference. You gotta know the language and how we call different things in order to be able to understand what's going on there when we are talking about the molecules and their reactions. Alright, moving on, we have the oxidation states. And when it comes to the oxidation states, the only thing that is going to be important to us here is the oxidation state of the central metal itself. Let's look at this tetrakis triphenylphosphine palladium complex. The very first thing that we gotta do here is to look at the complex itself and note if it has any charge at all. Here, the complex is neutral, so the overall charge here is 0. Next, we are going to look at our ligands and classify them as neutral or charged. So when I was going through the ligand classifications before, I did that on purpose. You simply will not be able to calculate your oxidation states without being able to classify your ligands first. It's all connected. And in this case, we have neutral ligands, meaning that the ligand's going to have the overall charge equal to 0 in this molecule. And since the molecule has to be balanced and have the overall charge of 0, the palladium oxidation state here would be 0 as well. Always remember, your metal atom has to balance the molecule whether the complex is neutral, like in this case, or maybe it is charged. Now, here is another example. In this case, I have 2 chloride ligands, and those guys are negatively charged. We also have 2 ammonia ligands which are neutral, giving us the overall charge equals 0 from that part. So in this case, platinum has to have the oxidation state of +2 in order to balance the complex and make it neutral. Now, here is another example. CP is the common abbreviation for the cyclopentadienyl ligand, which is hapta-5 ligand with a -1 charge. And since we have two of those guys, the overall charge that they are going to bring is going to be -2, meaning that the oxidation state of iron in this complex has to be +2 in order to balance it out. And finally, I've been showing you neutral complexes all the way, so let's look at something charged for a change. In this case, I have a charge of -3, so I'll have to keep that in mind when deciding what the oxidation state of my iron is in this complex. Here I have cyanide ligands which are negatively charged, and I have 6 of those guys, which would constitute an overall -6 charge from my ligands. And since the complex charge is -3, the difference that I have to balance it out with iron is -3, meaning that the iron oxidation state must be +3 in this complex in order to be able to balance it out. And if you absolutely have some sort of a formula to remember how to do this, you can remember that the complex charge equals to the metal's oxidation state plus charged donor groups in your molecule. So, depending on which two pieces of information you have, you can always easily reverse engineer the other missing bit. Alright, are we ready for the next bit? Next, we are going to talk about the d-notation. Now, here is the thing about the d-notation. The transition metal complexes tend to have a lot of electrons in them, and we are certainly not going to be showing them as dots around them like in Lewis structure or something. Instead, we are going to be using this d-notation. And the cool part about that number is that it can give us clues on reactivity, geometry, magnetic properties, help us with electron counting, and help us with ligand field splitting as well. Now, fun fact, you are not going to use any of that information within the scope of a regular introductory organic chemistry course, but we are going to be teaching that. You are going to see that in your textbook if you are covering transition metal complexes, and you are very likely to see it on your exam, so enjoy, I guess? So how do we calculate this d number? We calculate the d number by taking the group number where the metal is and subtract the oxidation state. For instance, here is the complex. This is the Wilkinson catalyst used in homogeneous hydrogenation, by the way, but the only thing that we care for right now is the d number for this complex. First, I look at my ligands here. I have a single negatively charged chloride, and I also have a neutral triphenylphosphine ligands here as well, meaning that my rhodium's oxidation state in this complex is going to be +1. Now, for the next part, I'm going to need to use my periodic table. I like to keep mine on the cover of my reference table binder because I tend to use it periodically.
Oh my god, so funny, I forgot to laugh.
Anyways. So rhodium is right here in the 9th group, which means that we have 9 valence electrons, subtracting 1, which is the oxidation state of rhodium here, which is +1, going to give us 8, so the d number for this complex is d8. Here is another example. In this case, the oxidation state of iron is +2, and since iron is in the 8th group of the periodic table, we end up with 8 valence electrons. 8 minus 2 gives us 6, meaning that that is a d6 complex. Now, I've mentioned that we don't really use the d number within the scope of a regular introductory organic chemistry, so where do we use it, if at all? And yes, we actually do use it in one place, and that is the electron count. So, let's talk about the 16 and 18 electron rule. The total number of electrons in the transition metal complex is going to be the d number plus the ligand electrons, the electrons that come from our ligands. Neutral ligands give us 2 electrons per donor group, like for instance this triphenylphosphine gives me 2 electrons, or ammonia. Both give us 2 electrons for our complex. Or let's say this diamine, that guy has 2 donor groups, providing us with 4 electrons if both of them bind to our metal. Similarly, the negatively charged ligands also give us 2 electrons. Like for instance this chloride gives us 2, the cyanide also 2, this hydride, you guessed it, it also gives us 2. Now, where things become a bit more interesting is with the pi bonds. We get 2 electrons per pi bond. Like for instance in this ethylene, we have 1 pi bond, which going to provide us with 2 electrons when it binds to a metal. Or let's say we have butadiene. This one has 2 pi bonds, which means that it can give us up to 4 electrons when it binds to a metal. Or let's say our favorite cyclopentadienyl that we have already seen before. Here we have 2 pi bonds and we also have an electron pair. So in total we are going to have it giving us 6 electrons, 4 from the pi bonds and 2 more from that electron pair, which technically is part of the pi system anyways. So, as a rule of thumb, you can just remember to count your pi electrons, and that's what you're going to get as the maximum number of electrons that your ligand can provide, provided all atoms are going to bind to your metal, of course. For example, let's look back at this tetrakis triphenylphosphine palladium complex that we have seen before. Using the information from earlier in this video, you can calculate that this is a D10 complex. We have 4 triphenylphosphine ligands here, each providing us with 2 electrons, meaning that we have our D10 plus 4 multiplied by 2, giving us 18 electrons total. So this is the 18 electron complex. Or how about this ferrocene guy that we have seen a few times today already as well? This is a D6 complex. Each cyclopentadienyl gives 6 electrons, so D6 plus 2 multiplied by 6, giving me 18 electrons again. Or how about this example here? This is a D6 complex. Our ligands here provide 2 electrons each, giving us D6 plus 6 multiplied by 2 for all of our ligands, resulting in 18 electrons again. And let's do just one more example. This is a D8 complex. Each ligand here gives us 2 electrons as per usual, so we get D8 plus 4 multiplied by 2 for all of our ligands, in this case giving us 16 electrons. And I'm sure you're already sensing the trend here. We're always going to either get 18 or 16 electrons. Most complexes obey the 18 electron rule. This is like your octet, but it's 18 and it's for transition metal complexes rather than regular molecules. If you count the electrons in your complex and it's not 18 or in some cases 16, something is wrong. You either haven't calculated things correctly or you have a bigger problem. Now, does it mean that complexes outside of 18 and 16 electrons do not exist? No, they actually do exist, and in this video I do have one complex that is a famous exception from the 18 electron rule. It only has 17 electrons. Can you go through the video and spot where that guy might be and let me know in the comments below? But as I said, as a general rule of thumb, most complexes are going to be either 18 or in some cases 16 electron complexes. For instance, this guy over here, nickel CO4 complex, you can check for yourself that this is indeed an 18 electron complex. If you got a different number, retrace your steps and try again. And since I've mentioned the 16 electron complexes a moment ago, the groups 8 to 11 metals, those guys over here, they tend to make 16 electron complexes with square planar geometry, because, well, of course, platinum block metals had to be special. Like for instance this Cl2 palladium triphenylphosphine twice complex, that one would be an example of a 16 electron complex. Whew, that was a ton of information. In this video you learned how to classify ligands, how to find the oxidation states, how to calculate the D numbers, and how to find the total number of electrons in your complex. In the next video I'm going to go over the basic mechanistic steps that we see in those complexes when they are participating in chemistry. So make sure you boop the like button, subscribe so you don't miss that one, and I will see you next time!